Hello everyone and welcome to my video about my process of marathon graphic design, and I wanted to show you how I make stuff. So usually I start on paper to just like sketch out my idea, and then I go into an Affinity designer and then I make it. So what I'm doing here is using the donut tool inside of Affinity, and I changed like the length and width of it, and I basically just rotated it around and put it in more random segments. And what I'm trying to do is mimic these data rings that we can see throughout Marathon. And then sometimes I just don't know what to do. So I went through a couple of tutorials to figure it out. And I found this one where it's like, oh, not this. This is like kind of unnecessary. But this one right here about how to make text circles. And that one really helped me to figure out the donut tool. I was going to try to use this like rectangular stuff to like make it into a half circle and such, but I chose ultimately not to choose that. This would be really helpful for like Star Wars user interface stuff, but that's besides the point. So what I was trying to do is make the UESC stuff. I'm making the logo right now. It's really hard to nail the E, but a nice thing is that you can edit basically the edges of it by a node mode, and then you can use the arrow keys. The nice thing is that the U in UESC is basically the same as the C, and you can just rotate that by 90 degrees, and then use the corner tool to bevel out those edges. And then I'm using Blender to basically like take these data rings that I was creating, and I would basically use them as part of the moon to make it look like that, like part of the USG ship. And I'm just rotating them around to give the impression that it's like much more digitally advanced. And then I'm making these like rectangular patterns that we see a lot of in Marathon, but I would highly recommend using a different color so that you're able to distinguish them. I also put a line in the center so that you can properly, like just on the ship, you know, it's split in half. I put in some like pixelated designs. I made this barcode just to make it look like more visually interesting and match the aesthetic of Marathon. By the way, when you import these images in Blender, I'd recommend that you do Shift A, images, mesh like plane, and then shadeless rather than an emission or principled, because it's just a whole dang mess. I'm just trying to figure it out here. Okay, and then I throw the final image into Calvary. And what I decided to do is use Enter Black for the UESC Marathon font, and then I rounded the edges and used Mode 9, which is my super favorite font, just to give the impression that it's terminal. And then I basically added some info, like it's been in it for a century on the planet Tau Ceti. And then I added the Marathon logo, because in the original design that I was making up with, I was putting it into there. And one piece of advice for those who are designing more Marathon stuff like this, I'd recommend that you look at Marathon stuff of like, how do you mimic that, basically kind of like have a twist on it by following the same design philosophies and principles of just maybe adding the barcodes, the Marathon logo in a certain spot, and yeah. And then I added these lines just to give it like a bit of separation. Um, and then also to like help separate it from the text, I used this square, and then I made 2 rectangles around it. It's kind of like they use that thing a lot throughout the marathon design. And then basically I added some 1s and 0s because I thought, you know, some code would really help make it visually more interesting. I made these patterns, and I'd highly recommend you make them too, so that you can really spice up your design and make it more visually unique. And you can just put them in there and put them around. It sucks that Affinity doesn't have this option to make procedurally generated like patterns, but you know, you can always make up your own. And so, yeah, that's about it. I basically try to make it as interesting as possible, and this is the final result. So I hope you guys really like that, and more is on the way.